Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. And we're coming at you in crunch time this week, guys. We have been looking for a guest all week. Unfortunately, guys, it was just not meant to be this week. A lot of my normal co-patriots on this show just had, things going on. They were busy this week. It happens. And also, I had a little bit of schedule conflicts myself. So I wanted to make sure we got some content out for you guys. We talk about these fights, right? I've been doing a lot of research on these fights. I still did my articles and my write-ups, everything like that, but want to make sure that we go, through the card, talk about all the fights that are going down, and hopefully we can find some edges along the way. Now, next week, guys, Wiz will be back with us in the driver's seat, so something to look forward to. But in any case, guys, let's get into it. I appreciate everybody who's rocking with us for Shanghai. I will be staying up all night. I'm a sicko like that. I hope that you guys are feeling the same way. But either way, we're going to talk about these bets, and hopefully you guys can find something you want to lock in before you go to sleep, or you stay up like I am. I've got the coffee brewed. So everybody, cheers to you if you're rocking with us. Let's talk about this first fight of the night. It's going down where we've got Diyar Nurgozhay taking on Uran Satibaldiev. And in this matchup, guys, it's a really weird fight. If you look at both these guys' DraftKings box scores from their last fight, they basically both put up, under 20 points. They really weren't very impressive overall. But you look at Uran Satibaldiev, the one thing you could say is he did go out there and land some big shots on Budai. Budai is a much larger fighter in the heavyweight division. He fought up on short notice, made a pretty good account of himself. The thing is, if you look at his regional tape, he does have a lot of sketchy moments, a lot of getting in bad positions, a lot of relying on his durability. And, that is something that could come back to bite him in the UFC, certainly. Martin Budai is known for winning minutes, winning positions, holding people against the cage. He's really not known for being the most dangerous guy. On the other side, Diyar Nurgozhay, he's got a lot of finishes. He got a nice knockout win, I believe, in the Contender Series as well. But then when you look at, what was so disappointing about that first fight with Brenton Iberio is that Brenton Iberio was able to touch him up a little bit on the feet. He was making him uncomfortable there. He got his takedown game going, and then he ends up getting submitted with a Kimura. So it was a disappointing result. And if you look at Uran Satibaldiev, he does have a Kimura finish in the LFA recently. So, maybe the stars align there. I did notice that there was a plus 1150 on the Uran sub at Bet Rivers, as well as a pretty big ends by sub price. So if that's something that you're interested in, I do think that, Diyar kind of showed he panicked a little bit last time. He made some bad decisions, and he's willing to tap sometimes if the going gets tough, right? On the other side, though, I do think Diyar is at his best a pretty good striker. I thought he looked good on tape in a lot of his fights coming in to the UFC, but it's very difficult to believe, that he's not going to be, a nervous wreck again. You watch that last fight, pawing at the eye, doing a lot of weird things, and maybe, it was just one case of UFC jitters, but I do think I'd like to see him, perform well. I want to show you guys on the screen right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at the OddsJam board just for a second, because it's a good way to give us an idea of where the lines are at. So let's take a look here. Uran Satibaldiev, is now a underdog on Novik. If you're looking at the lines right now that I'm looking at, guys, on the screen, and, that's a little bit surprising, right? If you looked earlier in the week, he's been a favorite all week. Let's go ahead and take a look as well at the line movement over on Bet Online, because I want to get a good picture for where this fight opened up. So right now, if we take a look at the opener, guys, this is crazy. So the opening price on Uran Satibaldiev is minus 250. When Bet Online took this to market, they really liked that side. Maybe because of his cardio, or maybe because of his intangibles. A little bit of the length, a little bit of that durability. I just don't know exactly, because I definitely saw a lot of sketchy things from him on tape. So that opening number is a little surprising for me. But with that being said, guys, you're now looking at him being like minus 101, even money. I'm seeing best available prices plus money now for Uran Satibaldiev. So I would say that if you were on the side of, Diyar, the value has pretty clearly been extracted in my view, right? Diyar opens up a plus 210, and now he's sitting at a minus 119. So the bus, is gone, right? The ship has sailed. Whatever analogy you want to use, I feel like Diyar was a fine click at plus money based on the speculation. Hey, he could have a better performance here. He looked like a decent prospect on Contender Series, and then it fell apart in his UFC debut. We've seen that happen to good fighters. So I see some people in the chat, some regulars here. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Sharpest chat in the game, all lining up here. Appreciate everybody, checking in as well. Tristan, Cam, Piaggio, YouTube. I appreciate all you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. But in any case, guys, I think that if you got the plus money on Diyar, fair play. I definitely understand where you're coming from. I did pick him to get the win in this fight, but ultimately, the more that I looked at this fight, the more I just don't feel good about it. I feel like this is a pretty sketchy fight, so it being lined close makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like both these guys are kind of in a prove-it spot. They need to go out there and show us what they're capable of, and if you're taking plus money on either side, I think that's fair and respectable, but I wouldn't lay chalk with either one of these guys because I saw enough concerning things for both of them. The nervous tick from Diyar, the cardio isn't always on point. And then on the other side, Uran Satibaldiev ending up in bad positions, letting rounds and minutes pass him by, hurting Martin Budai and really not having great finishing instincts to go after him and put him away. I think all those are reasons why I don't really feel great about betting on a fight like this. But we can move on, guys, to the next fight on the card. And this one is going to be Long Zhao taking on Su Young-Yu. And Su Young-Yu got the win over AJ Cunningham. That was his most recent performance in the UFC. And Long Zhao on the other side, he was able to go out and, take out Kang Bang Lee in the third round. And I did think that was a pretty impressive performance from Long Zhao. If you look at Long Zhao, guys, he's going to come in here with a pretty sizable height and reach advantage. He's the younger fighter. So for me, he checks all the anthropomorphic boxes and he's an underdog. That's always going to pique my attention. Here's the other thing, though. I've talked about this before. If you guys have watched my show for a long time, then I look at certain angles as long-term angles. It doesn't mean you go bet it every time. It's just something that you consider, right? You always take a look at this like, wow, this should pique my attention. Long Zhao, guys, has more professional experience and he's the younger fighter. I normally like to see that, and especially if you can get it at dog odds, that could be a powerful thing. So when I look at Su Young-Yu, he's lost before. He's not an invincible fighter, and he is a guy that you can get to him a little bit with the pace and the cardio. He likes to have a comfortable fight. He likes to be in control of the fight. He likes to go rack up a lot of control time, get to his takedowns, feel confident in those positions. And I think his best chance to win this fight is to go out there when they're dry early, try and take this guy down, get to his dominant jiu-jitsu positions and put the guy away. Because the longer, ironically, right, Long Zhao, the longer this fight goes on, I think the more it gives Long Zhao a chance to go out there and put hands on him, do real damage, and I think that Long Zhao, he's a guy that's enthusiastic about the fight. He's willing to go out there and fight hard for 15 minutes, give everything. And I feel like he's got, power on the feet. I think Kang Bang Lee is a decent fighter that really brings, his best when he steps into that octagon. And, that was an impressive performance from Long Zhao. So for me, I feel like, this is a close fight, in terms of like, hey, could I see Su Young-Yu getting to some takedowns? Yeah, especially when he's fresh early, maybe he could get to some takedowns, some control. I just think that number one, I favor the cardio of Long Zhao. Number two, I favor the striking of Long Zhao. And number three, I think that if this goes to a judge's decision, I think Long Zhao is going to have the crowd behind him. He's going to have the damage component kind of work in his direction, I feel. So Su Young-Yu, a lot of control, a lot of positions, will sometimes mix in his strikes, but I feel like he's a lot more comfortable as a grappler. So for me, Long Zhao is going to make it an uncomfortable fight for him. It's going to make him work at a high pace rate. And, I did mention before, if you're seeing like 7-1 and over on the Long Zhao KO, that would pique my attention. And Su Young-Yu by sub, if you like that side, it's like 8-1. I think that would be his best path to looking like a favorite or something in this fight, is going out there and just having better grappling techniques. But ultimately, I don't think Long Zhao is going to quit on himself. I think you're going to have to put this guy to sleep. You're going to have to break his arm or something in order to make him give up. So for those reasons, man, I'm going Long Zhao to get the win. He's my pick in this fight. And, again, from a betting standpoint, I would not really be looking to lay chalk with these guys, but Long Zhao at plus money, that would be the pick to click for me, or I would pass on the fight. And I do want to just point out, guys, if we look over at the odds jam board here, Long Zhao as high as plus 127 on Novig. That's a pretty decent price, especially relative to what you're seeing in some of the other parts of the market. I'm seeing Bet Online has been bet down to plus 113. It did open up at plus 145 for Long Zhao. It peaked at plus 160 if you take a look at the charts here. So I'm seeing some people in the chat also are looking at the Long Zhao side. Appreciate everybody sharing your thoughts. Please continue to do so, guys. My guy Ryan says, let's go, Liam. Appreciate you, Ryan. I'll take a sip to that, my man. Thank you so much. And I think that ultimately, again, when you look at these highly volatile fights, I'm always going to be a little more interested in going with the dog. Don't have to be right as frequently in order to make your return on investment there. And, I think Long Zhao presents enough problems that for me, it's an honest fight. Any plus money on Long Zhao would be the consideration. And again, we talked about no vig. You can get plus 127. Not a horrible look. Also, guys, one thing that stands out, right? You're looking at a Long Zhao who's minus 225 on the plus 3.5 spread. Like, that seems pretty bullish that, if this goes to the scorecards, they're liking that this guy's winning at least a round. And it's highly favored to go to the scorecards. So if it's a fight that's going to go to the scorecards and it's in China and you got a Chinese athlete and you've got a guy who's going to do more damage, like all those things say just like Zhao Long or pass, especially at plus money. But with that being said, guys, we can move along to the next fight on the card. And this is Yiza taking on Weston Wilson. And, I try to remind people all the time, one thing that you have to do in MMA in order to profit betting on underdogs, which is different than betting on favorites. And everybody's got their style. But one thing you have to be willing to do is risk looking like a fool. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times when somebody's a massive underdog, it's because there are reasons or there are paths to victory that could make them look like a massive underdog, right? If Yiza comes out there, lands one big punch and puts Weston Wilson away, then we're saying, wow, it was so free 99, minus 1,600 was the true price. But the thing for me that I look at is, quality of competition is always something I'm considering when I'm looking at these fights. I'm looking at what have you proven to me versus what are we speculating about. And I think that there's a lot of speculation that Yiza is a very good fighter. And I think that the evidence that he's a very good fighter is a little more scant. Now, that does not mean he is definitively a bad fighter, right? That's certainly not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that I don't see the evidence as clearly as everybody else does that Yiza is a very good fighter. Now, let's go back and just briefly take a look at the record of Yiza. He is 0-2, I should add, in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Right, so he has not won a fight yet in this promotion. I'll take you guys back to the Gabriel Santos fight. Gabriel Santos has a fraction of the experience of Yiza, right? Yiza, 29 professional bouts, and I understand that he's been fighting since a young age. We'll take that into consideration. But 10-2 for Gabriel Santos on the other side. And we know that Gabriel Santos is a very solid fighter. I believe he's 2-2 in the promotion. And when you look at how that fight turned out, he almost got brutally knocked out in the first round. Like Gabriel Santos put him down badly in the first round. It was, a testament to his toughness, his will, his desire that he got back up to his feet. But I also think Gabriel Santos, was a guy that was fighting a little bit reserved in that contest. He knew he needed a win. He had lost a couple fights. He was like going out there and making sure he was trying to do everything right. And so, again, hats off to the guy. He went out there and fought hard. But did it show me like, man, this guy's really got it all figured out? He's super UFC level. He's got real proven UFC level skills. I was like, no, he could take a good whooping. He could throw back. He's not afraid of that. But I thought clearly he was a class behind a guy like Gabriel Santos. That's my interpretation when I was watching the guy, right? Then I look at, okay, he's got some road to UFC fights. And we've talked about before, how do we evaluate the road to UFC fighters? We need to see them intermix with other athletes from other parts of the world, right? You see an Aaron Tao go out there and get the win. I think a lot of the Australia and New Zealand fighters got the win on road to UFC. There were certainly some Asian athletes that had success from different parts of the world as well. Hey, shout out to my guy, Nate. He says, yo, hope we're on Long Zhao today. My brother, Long Zhao is the pick for me. I think it's a dog or pass situation. So we are definitely, with it in terms of like how we're seeing that one, my man. I haven't bet it yet, but, maybe that plus 127 on Novik will call my name. That definitely did pique my interest a little bit. So, appreciate Nate as well, guys. Member for 6 months on the channel. Thank you so much, Nate. OG supporter. We truly appreciate you over here, my man. And, it wouldn't be the sharpest chat in the game without Nate. So thank you so much. If y'all remember, me and Nate, were both shouting Max Holloway from the rooftops inside the distance when he was going to be taking on Justin Gaethje, one of the greatest cashes in the history of this show. So shout out to Nate and appreciate you for your support, my man. But here's the other thing, guys. Yong Lee, not a bad fighter, but again, a fighter that's kind of stalled a little bit in the UFC. He's kind of been figured out in his recent performances. He lost a split decision to him. So you're looking at guys that, certainly have some potential, right? Certainly some guys that are prospects. But what has he really proven to me? He's proven that he could beat Asian regional level talent, and I think that that's an impressive thing, right? He's earned his right to be in the UFC. He's earned his right to go get these opportunities. And Weston Wilson is certainly a better opportunity for him to get the win than Gabriel Santos or Yong Lee. But let's go back and just take a look at this fact, guys. He was a plus 200 underdog when he took on Yong Lee and he lost the fight. He was a plus 200 underdog when he went out there and took on Gabriel Santos. He nearly got finished in the first round. And when he didn't get finished in the first round, right, he was able to make it marginally more competitive in 2 and 3, but I thought it was a clear Gabriel Santos win. So you see, he lost clearly twice as a plus 200 underdog, and now he comes in and he's minus 1,600 in, his next UFC fight. For me, that just feels like a massive overcorrection for a guy who's not proven that he's beating UFC level fighters. My guy, Nate, says, Kamikubo that fought long just beat former UFC fighter Eric Shelton in LFA, round 2 sub. Kamikubo had very little grappling success against Xiao. I love it. Great point there. And also I see in the chat, my guy GBO Titan says, Xiao 45 plus significant strikes on 200. That's how I played him. Interesting. Okay. My guy Ben in the chat mentions this, right? I was going to bring it up. Anyone sub by heel hook, I'll never trust. Weston Wilson's been subbed in meme-like fashion before too, so I'm not going to go out here on my high horse and say like, man, Weston Wilson's just the bee's knees. He does everything perfect. But here's the truth. I think you look at a guy like Weston Wilson on the other side, right? Has he fought better or worse competition in the UFC than Yiza? In my opinion, he's fought much better competition in the UFC, okay? He goes out there and he takes on Joanderson Brito. You know what Joanderson Brito has? 5 wins in the UFC. Right? Joanderson Brito can crack on the feet. He's a dangerous guy. And you know something about that fight? Weston Wilson got to 2 deep leg lock entries in that fight. And he had Joanderson Brito second-guessing some decisions, right? When we talked about Pat Sabatini and why I thought he had a chance to beat Joanderson Brito, when everybody was talking about Joanderson, I was talking about Weston Wilson and what he was able to accomplish, what he was able to show in that fight. And by the way, when you've got a questionable chin, so to speak, right, like a guy like Weston maybe has, then you look at, okay, how do I win fights? And Weston Wilson's figured it out, guys. He went out there and has been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 20 years. So he came out of the, camp with Wonder Boy and everybody's thinking like upstate karate and all this stuff. He's been training for years and years under Giva Santana, the arm collector, right? And Giva Santana gave him his black belt in April. So Weston Wilson has invested 20 years learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he went from being a not very good Jiu-Jitsu player to being a Jiu-Jitsu player that can go out there and claim that he has a win in the UFC in the first round via submission. He's been credited with many submission attempts in the UFC despite having short fights. You know who else he went out there and fought, guys? Lord Gene Silva. Lord Gene Silva, undefeated in the UFC, 5-0, gone out there and absolutely killed everybody. So they give Weston Wilson, guys, 2 absolute difficult tasks, impossible Brazilian jacked guys that know jiu-jitsu that basically had him covered everywhere, right? Had his number everywhere. And you had little doubt about it. You look at his prices going into those fights. Weston Wilson, guys, was a plus, I think it was 800 underdog against Joanderson Brito. He was a plus 600 underdog against Gene Silva. You look at, okay, he's a smaller underdog against Gene fucking Silva than he is against 0-2 in the UFC, Yiza. For me, that's already just absurd, right? And what has happened in the intervening time? Weston Wilson fought Jekka Seregi, and I remember people telling me, clear as day, Jekka Seregi is going to knock this guy the fuck out. Jekka Seregi is going to put hands on this guy. Jekka Seregi is going to kill this guy. And I had just talked up Jekka Seregi before the Lucas Alexander fight. I was like, what has Lucas Alexander showed us that he's UFC level? I was like, Jekka might go out there and knock this guy dead. And then Jekka went out there and knocked him dead. So you look at, Jekka's got real power in his hands. Weston Wilson was aware of that. What did he do? He went out there and shot takedowns. He went out there and got to the top position. He went out there and aggressively hunted for submissions. and he went for 3 different submission attempts until he got the one that he needed, and he put Jekka away. Now, Jekka is a bad grappler, right? But Jekka is an explosive puncher, and Weston Wilson proved in a UFC setting that he could go out there, implement a grappling-heavy game plan, and get the win. By the way, would you say that Yiza is more comparable in skill, talent, and preparation to somebody like Jekka Seregi, who's another road to UFC athlete, right? Or is he closer in kind to somebody like the undefeated in the UFC 5-0 Lord Gene Silva? For me, he's much more like a road to UFC archetype of fighter, a guy that has some skills, a guy that can go out there and mix it up in different positions. How many significant strikes is Yiza, going out there and landing in his fights? He's really not going out there and lighting up the scoreboard, throwing a ton of offense. So do I think he can knock out Weston Wilson? Yes. Do I think he could go out there and pace Weston Wilson? Sure. But when I look at this line, it seemed absolutely absurd to me to see Weston Wilson priced at plus 800 dog after he was just plus 3XX and went out there and easily cleaned the guy up in the first round. And then you look at, okay, what did he do before that? He threatened Joe Anderson Brito with 2 deep leg lock attempts, and he got murked by a guy that I think would absolutely kill Yiza in the first round in Gene Silva. Like, no disrespect at all, but like, what would Gene Silva do to this guy? He would probably put him in a bag in the first round. So for me, that's just the way it is, right? Like, Weston Wilson had a tougher schedule, and he went out there and actually performed just as good. So it's like, I don't know. Weston Wilson plus 800, sure. Weston Wilson sub round 1, absolutely. And by the way, it's not like we're playing with just a risk, right? It's like playing with house money, right? Last time out, had Weston Wilson money line, check. Had Weston Wilson ends by sub, check. Had the Weston Wilson sub prop, check. So check last time out. And now you're going to give another opportunity where this guy primarily goes out there to grapple, but he got submitted by a 7-10 journeyman fighter, right, via heel hook in the first round. It's like, okay, let's go mix it up on the ground. Let's go find out. And if he's the better guy, I'll take my hat off to him. I'll clap for him, right? But at the end of the day, numbers are everything to me. And I see a guy in Weston Wilson who's got 1 UFC win and who's invested a lot of time, effort, and energy in getting better at his skills and his craft. And he's gone out there and proven he can win a fight at the UFC level. And we got another guy in Yiza who was nearly finished in his last fight at the UFC level. The fight before that against another Asian prospect that's still trying to prove his stuff. He went out there and lost a split decision. So I just don't feel like this guy has shown me I'm lights out. I'm reliable chalk at minus 1,600. And that's it. So I'm going with Weston Wilson here for the upset. And I think that, if you like the Yiza side, the way I would look at this is Yiza by KO. More often than not, I do think that's how he would win the fight. I don't really like how Weston Wilson reacts to getting hit, but I think that the decision is also in play. So ultimately, I just don't really like the Yiza side. I think he's overpriced as a favorite. I think that Weston by sub is more live here. I don't know that I trust his cardio at 36 years of age, but here's the other thing, guys. Just look at the metrics on size. Like, again, the age is not going our direction. I understand that. That's part of the line here. But 6'1" compared to 5'7", 73-inch reach. This guy is a big man, Weston Wilson, like a long guy, awkward guy, and knows how to grapple. Black belt under Giva Santana. Like, let's see what happens. For me, at these kind of prices, a guy who's got 17 wins and all 17 are inside the distance, that's a dangerous guy. So let's find out. All right, guys, next up, we have a really weird fight here. I think that Michel Pereira at his best should go out there and smoke somebody like Kyle Dawkins. I just think it's hard to say he's at his best when he's looked kind of shaky in his last couple fights. Shout out to Bill Fay in the chat. Shout out to Adolfo, says smash the over 1.5. I think you mean for that last fight. I don't really think that that's a good idea. Based on how Yiza fights, I get why you'd say that, but I just think based on how Weston Wilson fights, he's normally in very chaotic fights. I don't think he's been out of the first round in the last 6 or 7 years. So Weston Wilson normally gets to work early and tries to cash that check in one. And, again, some of these guys were bigger punchers, but he's also an older guy now. And he's also a guy that puts himself into, grappling situations where, if somebody is able to defend those situations, they might be able to open up with ground and pound from the top position. So something to take into consideration. My guy Nate says Fluffy took his soul. Did he? He's asking the question. Man, he might have, right? When you look at that last fight with Abus Magomedov, it was like Michel Pereira forgot they were fighting until the third round, turned it up a little bit late. But he was a guy that kind of let that fight slip through his fingers. Didn't look very impressive there. I did think that Abus had a chance to go out there and win. I thought he would have to wrestle more to do it. And instead, he was able to just kind of hurt him a little bit early, keep him at bay in the second round, and then not completely death gas in the third, enough to just hang on, when Michel started to pick up the pace a little. So I think that Michel is one of these guys that is very difficult to get a beat on, right? Like, I thought Petrosky would probably go out there and give him some problems. And then Petrosky got absolutely cleaned up in the first exchange. And obviously Petrosky doesn't have a great chin, but Dawis doesn't have that great a chin either. And Petrosky is a little bit of a more proven wrestler than Dawis. But with that being said, Dawis is one of these big, long guys who I think could maybe try and clinch with Michel Pereira and try and tire him out that way, even if he's not able to get the takedowns. Just make it a fight that Michel doesn't want to be in, sloppy, type of work against the fence, gritty, grimy, knees to the body, knees to the thigh. I think that's how Kyle Dawis would win this fight. But for me, the way that I would look at this is like, if I like the Pereira side, I'm just looking at his early finish props. Like, if he's who he's supposed to be, he goes out there, finishes this fight, right? But if he goes out there and, he's kind of trying to let the fight play out a little bit in the first round like he did last time, and, taking his time and giving Dawis opportunities to push him back to the fence and things like that, I think Dawis is a fine live entry. I do think Dawis' success in this fight would be predicated on getting him to rounds 2 and 3, kind of dragging him into a little bit of deeper water, making him breathe a little bit, getting some lactic acid buildup. Michel can fight for 15 minutes, but even in some of the fights that he's won over 15 minutes, like I think of the Nico Price fight, that comes to mind, down at 170, obviously. But he was like kind of gassing out in that fight and ending up in bottom position and going for like weird backward flips that could have gotten him disqualified. So he's always making suboptimal decisions, I feel, in his fights, but he is an explosive, athletic guy. And, he's got good finishing instincts as well. A lot of guys, want to go out there and grapple with Oleksiejczuk, but not a lot of guys hurt him really bad on the feet, force him into, a bad exchange and then take his neck like that. And we called it on the show that it was a live possibility for that fight. I was like, if I was going to bet anything on Pereira, I would just bet the sub. And then he went out there and easily submitted him. So I think when you look at Pereira, I don't expect him to sub Dawis, but like, he's shown basically he does not have a preference. If he can get you out of there, he will. I think Zelim Imadaev, he kind of beat him up and then took the no hooks rear naked choke. So I think Pereira is a more dangerous guy, but I think Dawis wants it better. So for me, that's the kind of fight where pre-fight, you maybe go with the athlete, but if it becomes a dog fight, you go with the dog. So I think a live entry on Dawis is probably preferred for me, because the chance of him getting sparked out in the first round are, for me, the number one way he would lose this fight. And, then hopefully he gets another opportunity, right? Because Dawis is a guy stepping up on short notice, had some tough run out in the UFC before, but ultimately he's got a skill set that's solid. It's just not remarkable, especially on the feet. And I think that his speed is probably a little bit less than Pereira, but he does offer that big, long man, ability. So let's see if he can go lean on this guy in the clinch and get something going. The Darce Knight, I love that nickname, but I don't think he's getting a Darce here unless he can drag this guy to round 2 or 3. So for me, it's Pereira early. It's Dawis maybe late or in a close decision type of thing. I feel like if Pereira doesn't finish him, something probably went wrong for Pereira. That's kind of the way I see it. But we'll see. Pereira is a guy that has won a bunch of UFC decisions, but a lot of times, like I said, they're 29, 28. They're a little bit more competitive than you like. He does some things that are boneheaded, a little bit more showmanship than making great decisions. So next up, guys, this is one I'm excited to talk about. We got Rongzhu taking on Austin Hubbard. I looked at the social medias for Rongzhu, and I thought that this guy looked like he was in incredible shape. I thought that he also is a guy that, has kind of shown he can go out there and put damage on people. I think lesser men than Cody Steele fooled the tent in that fight. Cody was getting battered out there, and he just kept standing in there taking the damage. He's a warrior and a good jiu-jitsu guy, a good grappler, but the physicality, the size of Rongzhu, I think was a little bit of a problem for him. And, you look at Austin Hubbard, he's going to present some of the same measurables here, but he is 8 years older. And I've never been high on Austin Hubbard at all, guys. If you've looked back at like my analysis and my work, like I'm never super high on this guy. And I did think that he had a chance to win his last fight. Like I had looked at Medeiros, I had looked at the tape, I had seen him getting taken down, I'd seen him in bad situations and positions. And, you know, I just think that Hubbard is a guy that blew it in that fight, you know, like made bad decisions, cost himself a winnable fight. And I don't really trust this guy at all, man. Like, I don't think that he's a great decision maker. I don't think he's a very violent guy. I don't think he's the most dangerous guy. And if you look at his run in the UFC, guys, besides Roosevelt Roberts, who I believe he beat on The Ultimate Fighter, and I think it was a close decision, if my memory serves, which his wins are almost always very close decisions. When I look at this fight, like, I think Hubbard is going to get beat up in this fight. Like, I think he's going to get hurt in this fight. And I think that additionally, like, when he got hurt against Kurt Holloway, like, I thought he basically just was like, get me out of here and take my neck. And, you know, Kurt's obviously a good grappler. Take nothing away from Kurt. But I felt like Kurt expected more resistance. I expected more resistance from Austin Hubbard in that fight. I thought Kurt was going to win. I picked him in my article, but I said, I think round 3 or split decision, and he went out there and kind of took him for his lunch money. So for me, man, I just don't really trust Austin Hubbard as a UFC level guy. Aside from that Roosevelt Roberts fight I just mentioned, he's never beaten a guy in the UFC that has a win in the UFC. Max Roscoff, you know, came for a cup of coffee and he did not stay in the organization. If you look at Michael Figlak, I believe he's 0-2 in the UFC. You look at Dakota Bush, I think he went 0-2 in the UFC. We call that in wrestling, guys, 2 in barbecue. And I believe Kyle Prepolek has the unfortunate distinction of being 0-3 in the UFC. Let me just fact check that to make sure I'm not slandering the great Kyle Prepolek. Yeah, 0-3 in the UFC. So this guy, Austin Hubbard, has one win, right? The win that he has here over, Aaron McKenzie, I think, has a UFC win too, right? No, he doesn't. So even better. Nice. He has literally one win, which was over Roosevelt Roberts via split decision. Roosevelt was 4-5 in the UFC. That's his only win over a guy with a UFC level win. And on the other side, you know, Rongzhu is a guy that has multiple UFC wins, right? So he has a win over Brandon Jenkins via knockout, and that wasn't that great of a fight. But you look at the fights that he lost, Rodrigo Vargas, he was a young man coming into that one and kind of got outdone there positionally. I think he got taken down in that fight. Ignacio Bahamondes, he's gone on to have plenty of success in the UFC. And then you look at Chris Padilla. Chris Padilla is a dangerous man. You know, Chris Padilla is what I call a young veteran. He knows how he wins fights. And it was a competitive fight. He landed one big damaging elbow, was able to close the show with that. He's very dangerous with those elbows. I think that was a lesson learned for Rongzhu. Do I expect Austin Hubbard to land some big elbows? Or is that, like, no, I really don't. So for me, I think that this is going to be one-way traffic and Rongzhu's swinging the hammer. So as far as I'm concerned, he's going to go out there and probably put big hands on this guy, probably make him make bad decisions. And Austin Hubbard's 3-3 career to the submission prop. He's been put away a number of times via that method. And even in some of these fights where he's gone the distance, you know, Vince Michel gave him the ye old tour of the octagon. Hernandez and Medeiros, he went to splits there. I mean, that's fine. Losing to Joe Selecki, you know, we'll let you off the hook for that one. But the way it happened, man, it was almost like there was no resistance in the grappling. The Kurt Holloway fight I already mentioned was really not great for me. So Rongzhu is still wanting to fight Taco too. I absolutely agree. I think Rongzhu is one of these guys, you got to kill him to get him out of there. You got to really put a hurting on this guy. And I just don't think that Austin Hubbard's capable of that. And frankly, I think Rongzhu is going to be doing the hurting. So yeah, I think Rongzhu finishes him, guys. And, you know, I did see that the sub prop, the round 2 and 3 props are all pretty big. I don't blame anybody for taking those. You know, I'm going to have some kind of angle on that fight for sure. Shout out to everybody in the chat, though. I'm seeing Trap Lord. I think that's his first shot there. I'm seeing some people, you know, Green King. So appreciate all you guys making some comments as well. Local Man Shakes Fist. Thank you to all you guys for rocking with us. It's 12:40 local time. We're going to take a quick sip of the coffee. And we're right on to this prelim fight going down in the flyweight division. It's 2 men, Loner Kavanagh. He's looking to make his claim, right? 2-0 in the UFC. If he can move to 3-0, can announce himself as a real prospect, because on the other side, you've got the 6-5 in the UFC, Charles Energy Johnson. And he's a big underdog now in this fight, guys. Let's go back to the odds jam screen. You're going to see it in real time, just like I am. I have no idea exactly where it's at now, but I did see plus 2XX on the board before we got on the show. Now I'm seeing plus 228 for Charles Energy Johnson in this fight. This fight is massively favored to go the distance, right? You're seeing minus 350 on the over 2.5. You're seeing plus 3.5. So a point spread for Charles Johnson at minus 138. This is the kind of fight where, the odds makers are basically saying it's looking like it's going to be a close decision, but it's going to go to Loner Kavanagh, right? The way that they're booking out this fight. And one thing I noted is earlier in the day even, there was definitely more action on Charles Johnson than the line would indicate, right? Like, when I look at a line, I like to normally see, is the line reflecting the market activity? And if it's not, why? That's a question I ask, right? And it doesn't mean that every time that the market doesn't respect the money or something, they're right. It's certainly a give and take situation. Got to shout out our guy, Nate Brown, with the dono. He says, hit the like, everybody. So not only does he hit the dono, but he also tells everybody to hit the like, showing support. I appreciate you very much, my man. And I think that, hitting the like, great, easy way to show love and support while we're live here on the air. So I appreciate everybody for that support. Thank you. But if you look at these two guys, like Charles Johnson, he's 34 years of age, so he's starting to get up there a little bit, especially for this division. We have seen him buzzed on the chin a little bit before as well. But, man, you look at this guy, 5'9" compared to 5'4". He stands much taller. He's got a 70-inch reach. He's got a 3-inch advantage over his opponent here. You look at the amount of experience, it's not close, not in the UFC, where Charles Johnson has had plenty of fights, but also – not in, his professional career. This is a guy in Charles Johnson who's fought a lot. He's fought high-level fights. He's fought 5-round fights. So if you said to me, like, who's more likely, and I don't mean this to be dismissive of Charles Johnson. Like, I hope I'm wrong about this. But, like, if you said who's more likely to maybe get to some of those big contendership fights and stuff like that, maybe it is a guy like Lonnie Kavanagh, who's still just 26 years of age, who's got a lot of potential, who's got a lot of reason to believe in his prospect status. He goes out there, he throws hard. He's got good, power in his hands, knocked out Antoine Ho. That was a nice shot, but I don't like the output that I've seen from this guy. If you look at his box scores, they have not been relevant in his fantasy career, right? You look at this guy, he's underperformed his salary in both of his UFC wins. And you look at, he's also lost at least one round on at least 2 judges' scorecards in both of his UFC fights. So you look at Charles Johnson on the other side, he's got really good wins. He's got really good skills, and he's a guy that typically goes out there and fights hard for your dollar. Now, if you have to say the biggest concern for Charles is he does tend to, have competitive fights. When he's not able to go out there and really pace a guy and get the finish, he normally lets guys hang around. He normally lets guys land some. He takes some, gives some, a little bit of exchanging. And he kind of relies on the judges understanding his game plan and how he's, landing the cleaner shots and things like that. But if you've got a knockout win over Joshua Van, if you've got, a bunch of quality UFC wins under your belt, if you've shown you can go out there and put up huge, significant strike totals, and work at a really high pace rate, Charles isn't a guy that consistently is throwing over 100 significant strikes, but he's shown he could do it, right? And I think that Lonnie Kavanagh having to rely on his wrestling and grappling in his last fight, could be a problem here, right? Like if you get cut open, if you get busted up by a guy like Charles Johnson, which is possible, then, where exactly does that leave you? You're just going to try and wrestle this guy? Like, I do think he's got fine wrestling. I just think it's not better than the guys that have tried to take down Charles Johnson, and many of them have gotten very tired by the 3rd round attempting that game plan. You look at Esteban, he was on, a little bit of huff and puff later on in the fight. So I do think that for me, it's a clear dog or pass situation. Like when I look at the fight, the way that I would look to target Kavanagh if I thought he was going to win this fight is I would either, buy down on the decision prop if I wanted to be a little bit more conservative, right? A split decision angle if you want to go that way. Or you look at, hey, you got a 34-year-old flyweight against a young kid who's fast, and Charles been buzzed before by some smaller guys that throw big power, and maybe Lonnie can get him out of there. You look at the ITD is like 4-1. The fight not to go the distance is like plus 255. Like you can get contrarian here and just lean into violence as an angle if that's the way you see it. But from a money line standpoint, purely, like it does feel like a dog or pass situation. You got a proven guy, not only proven in the UFC in terms of a winner, but a guy who's won as an underdog before as well. I believe Jake Hadley, I believe Charles Johnson against Joshua Van. He was an underdog in both of those fights. and he went out there and got the win. So Charles can go out there and do it as a dog, but I do worry that a guy that relies on the judges sometimes, you're in another part of the world, the crowd's probably going to be really behind this Lonnie Kavanagh character, and those are the kind of things that can cost you. And Charles has been there before, right? He's lost close decisions that could have went either way. And, that's the kind of thing where if you're holding the ticket and he loses the split, you can tell yourself, hey, it was close. But that's my worry here is that Charles will leave it a little too close, maybe not go out there, put a stamp on this one. And, I will say, though, I like how he's talking. He's always been a vocal guy, but he's basically saying, like, I know I need to go out there and make a statement and show, exactly who I am in this division, and have them put me against the top flight competition, not, down here. And it's unfortunate for him to have those great wins, great performances in the UFC and still be fighting the killers, the Temirovs, the guys popping for drugs and all these things. So Charles Johnson now has a huge opportunity to put himself right back towards that title contention by, stealing this kid's hype. And I think that Lonnie Kavanagh deserves hype, man. I talked about before the Antoine Hope fight, his KO prop was plus 600 there. It's plus 500 now against Charles Johnson, who's never been fucking finished, who's a tough bastard, guys. He's got 10 wins inside the distance, never been finished, gone 5 rounds before. So can you hurt him? Sure. Could you put him in a sub attempt? A couple guys have. Can you make this guy quit? It's very fucking difficult, right? So if Lonnie does it, again, you take your hat off. You say this guy's a true prospect. But you have to prove it to me at minus 255 against a guy like this, against the best guy you've ever fought, against the most experienced guy you ever fought. I'm not buying that price. Next up, guys, we got Mahashate taking on Gage Yong. And, I always try and come up with like, all right, this is how I see it going for this guy. This is how I see it going for that guy. I think both these guys are live by knockout or decision. I think that's just the way I see this fight. Like, I don't see a huge advantage here for either guy, except that I think, Gage Yong hits like a truck. Mahashate, I believe, hits like a truck. I think Gage Yong takes a little bit of a better punch than Mahashate, but Mahashate is going to be slinging leather, and he's got a height advantage. He's got a reach advantage here. They're the same age. So, I think these guys are going to crack each other with huge shots. Gage Yong is not afraid to exchange. He's not afraid to get in there and throw. And I thought his fight against Evan Elder, he held his own. He went out there and made a decent account of himself. But I do think that Gage kind of has a build of like a 45er that just has some musculature, and he's explosive and he's willing to go out there and mix it up. But that's my only concern for him, is that he's undersized for this division. Mahashate is a big man, 25. Again, looks like these guys are mostly showing up in good shape, the local market fighters, that is. And I look at Gage Yong. He's flying halfway across the world here. He's got to make some adjustments there in terms of the preparation and stuff like that on the ground. You could just have some logistical trouble getting the right food and these kind of things. I don't think it'll be a problem for him. But when it comes down to it, like if it could be a close fight, if it could be a close decision, do I want to go out there and lay the price? And for me, I just don't. I think either guy could win it. I think that they could rob Gage Yong, even if he wins 2 rounds here. It's that kind of fight for me as well. Because Gage Yong, he doesn't have a huge social imprint. He's not a guy that's selling tickets right now for the UFC. And, I just think when you look at some of these fights, you got to be careful. And I do think this is the kind of fight where you could go to the scorecards thinking, hey, I got this one, 2 rounds to 1 pretty clearly. And some guy you've never heard of reads off a scorecard that you can't believe. And, again, I'm not saying that's definitively going to happen. It's just my concern here, right? I think either guy KO. I think either guy close decision. That's the way I see this going down. And I don't think there's a huge edge in either direction. So for that reason, guys, we can move on to the next fight. But I will say, Mahashate, his win over Steve Garcia is the best on-paper win that either one of these guys has. I have no doubt about that. But on the other side, Gage Yong has fought some tough guys. Quillen Salkild, tough guy. Evan Elder, tough guy. And, those are hard fights to win, right? Those are guys that can really push it, really mix it up in different phases as well. And I don't know if Mahashate has the same depth to his game. He's got power. He's got that explosive ability. He can knock out anybody. But if he doesn't get that knockout going, it's going to be a thin margins fight for him. All right, guys. Next up, I'm going to butcher this name, but I'm really going to try my best. We've got Taiyilake Nueraji taking on Kiefer Crosbie. And Kiefer Crosbie, an Irishman who's training at Extreme Couture with Eric Nixick and the boys, right? So Kiefer Crosbie basically said, I had no coach. Like, I was coming into my fights where, I had a couple mates, I had a couple friends, I had a couple, maybe my old boxing coach or something. I had no head MMA coach. I was just coming in blind for these fights and taking a big risk. And that's a horrible way to win UFC fights, right? I talked about before, maybe Gage Young has a little bit of an undersized frame. Unfortunately for Kiefer Crosbie, he kind of strikes me as a tweener. If there was a 165-pound weight class, if there was a 160-pound weight class, maybe he'd have a little bit more success. But I don't know that he could make 155. He's 5'11", 70-inch reach, carries a decent bit of musculature. I think it'd be a really tough cut for him to get down. But at 170, he's tiny, compared to some of these guys he's going to fight. He's giving up 5 inches of reach in this fight. He's giving up 3 inches of height. He's giving up 11 years, is that? Yeah, 11 years of age. Like, there's just a lot of things working against him in this fight. And when I'm saying to myself, like, okay, could Nueraji have, UFC debut jitters? Absolutely. Anybody could. But barring that, against a guy who's had more UFC fights than Kiefer Crosbie just, I feel like he needs to show something in the UFC in order to prove he belongs here at all. Kiefer Crosbie's gotten cleaned up in the first round in both of his UFC fights. And when you don't have a coach, these kind of things happen, right? But again, a lot of guys change gyms, and it takes some time to get used to a new system. It takes time to get used to a new coaching staff. And I don't know how he's going to look, right? But what I do know is that the last times we've seen him, his grappling looked just laughably bad for the UFC level, like just not up to par, period. His cardio has not looked like a selling point. I thought he started okay in the striking, which you say, if my memory serves. And then he very quickly was out of breath because he's over swinging. He's not breathing properly when he's out there. Sometimes he's kind of holding his breath and throwing really hard, and things that just are not sustainable. So for me, Kiefer Crosbie is a guy that's alive to go out there and chin somebody. He's going to throw heavies on the feet. I don't think his grappling's really there, but I think he could go out there and land on this guy. Nueraji takes huge chances. Nueraji puts himself in the fire. Nueraji is a guy that, you want to watch fight. He's a fan-friendly style fighter. He goes out there, puts himself in harm's way, taking risk to knock people out. And that's what he does, and that's why he's finished everybody he's fought and beat, right? But that's also why he got finished in his one loss, right? So you look at, a guy in Nueraji who takes a ton of risks, who's going to go out there and, put himself in harm's way. He could get clipped. And if it's not in this fight, he could get clipped in the near future, right? He's going to go out there and make it a I kill you or you kill me type of fight. And that is a fight that Kiefer Crosbie can win. Make no mistake, right? He's an Irishman who throws full heat whenever he gets the chance. So I think that this is a guy, shout out to everybody in the chat. I had to hit a couple quick bans on whatever was going on there, but putting my rent money on Aljo Sergey Zhang by KO. God bless and good luck. I always say there's no locks in life, but I do see where you're coming from in terms of the picks there. But for me, not a huge parlay guy. Anyways, we're back to this fight, and I'll just close out by saying this. I think that Nueraji stops him in the first 2 rounds unless Kiefer Crosbie finds a big shot, just because I don't think Kiefer Crosbie can keep the pace that this guy's willing to push, looking for the finish. So again, UFC debut jitters, you don't want to lay minus 520 on a debutant that takes a ton of risks and puts himself in the fire against a guy who throws everything into every punch. But he's 11 years younger. He's the bigger man by a huge amount. Somebody asked in the chat, my guy GBO Titan says, Nueraji's sub, is it live? I know he's not a grappler, but Kiefer got sub by Dusay. I do think that it's live for this fight to end by sub for Nueraji. Yeah, I think Kiefer Crosbie's grappling's real bad. And, I also think that part of it is that he capitulates a little bit when he gets tired, when he gets fatigued. You can get him into bad positions and make him live to fight another day. Let's put it judiciously. So Green King says the under 1.5 here is crazy at minus 220. I do see where you're coming from in terms of 7.5 minutes. A lot of fights go over 7.5 minutes. It's a big underprice, but I do think that Kiefer Crosbie fights tend to be correlated with the unders more often than not. And then you look at, Nueraji, I think he's going to be an under fighter as well over the course of his career, just the way he goes out there. Unless he shores up the defense, unless he changes his style, he's a guy that's going to go put himself in harm's way. But at 24, you can afford to take those risks a little bit more than at 35. And so ultimately, I think Nueraji is going to put him away in the first 2 rounds and probably knock him out. But I do think the sub is live. I get where you're coming from. All right, guys. Next up, we got Sumudaerji taking on Kevin Borhas. And, I'm going to check this live on the air right now, guys, because I actually have no idea. But let's go ahead and take a look. I'm on OddsJam, and I'm pulling up the method of victory for this fight. So I'm going to look at this in real time and see it with you guys. Yeah, Sumudaerji by submission. I'm seeing as high as 12-1. I'd have to look at the rest of the market and see exactly where that shakes out to. But ultimately, I think Kevin Borhas can be clipped on the feet. I think he's a good enough striker. I think he's a solid enough guy, but he's a much smaller man in this matchup. And I think we've seen real improvements in the grappling from Sumudaerji. I mentioned before that we've seen Charles Johnson not finished on the ground, but put in some real danger. And Sumudaerji, guys, had him in a very serious submission attempt in that fight that could have been fight ending. And I think that Charles Johnson's a more proven grappler than a guy like Kevin Borhas by a pretty significant margin. So if that's the case, then Sumudaerji, in my opinion, has, knockout power on the feet. At his best, that's what he's kind of known for. Prior to the UFC, he was a huge knockout artist. And then he got to the UFC. He got 1 knockout, I believe, but he's really struggled to find those finishes. I think that Sumudaerji is a guy that has power. I think he's a guy that has gotten better on the grappling, gotten better with his submission game. So I don't think Borhas is a bum. I don't think Borhas sucks, but I think Borhas can get tired. I think Borhas can, kind of get into, negative grappling situations. And I think that Sumudaerji is probably just more likely to win this fight, by a couple different methods. So, like, if they just strike it out on the feet, I guess either guy could get clipped. Sumudaerji is not a guy with perfect cardio every time out, but I think that, Kevin Borhas, the way he wins this fight is probably by touching this guy to the body, mixing up some boxing techniques, using his footwork a little bit, being elusive. But if they exchange, I think Sumudaerji's got more power overall. And I also think that, like I said, I think his grappling's just leveled up a little bit in recent times, and maybe he can make that an offensive asset here. So give me the bigger Chinese fighter, the Tibetan Eagle, to get the job done here. But it's not a fight where I'm going to be laying the chalk price with Sumudaerji. I one time, guys, had Sumudaerji inside the distance. I believe it was plus 125 against Matt Schnell, and I wanted to puke in my hands watching that fight. He hurt him so bad, multiple occasions. He had him wobbled. He had him on all sorts of, different streets, right? He's walking down this street. He looked like he was drunk out there, and he still found a way to get on top and get the submission there. So I think that was a great comeback, a great performance, but Sumudaerji did show he's a dangerous guy, just a guy that you want to avoid trusting at significant shock because he can fumble the bag. Next up, guys, we got Sergey Pavlovich taking on Waldo Cortes-Acosta. And I always try and call these fights like I see them. I think unless Sergey Pavlovich has fallen off a cliff competitively, this should be a fight that he goes up there and wins. Waldo Cortes-Acosta is taking a huge step up in competition as far as I'm concerned. I thought he arguably lost the fight to Sergey Spivak. You can look at media scores. You can look at judges, how they kind of scored that fight and take some issue with it, right? But you can also look at the fact that, Sergey Pavlovich has lost to really good fighters in the UFC. Alistair Overeem is a world championship level fighter. That was when he first got to the UFC. He kind of got big brothered there, taken down to the ground by a big man who was on lots of steroids, and he got beat up there. He got given a tour of the octagon. Then he rattled off a ton of wins in the UFC, knockouts in the first round, being extremely dangerous, showing he's a huge power puncher, and going out there with big power punchers like a Derek Lewis, like a Tai Tuivasa, even a Curtis Blades, a guy who's a very proven UFC heavyweight. And he put them all down. So you look at this guy, Sergey Pavlovich, and you got to say to yourself, who has gotten over on this guy? World championship level fighters. Alexander Volkov, prior to the UFC, was a world champion, right? You look at in the UFC, he's been right near the title level since he got there. You look at Alistair Overeem, he was a UFC championship level fighter. And it's these are the kind of guys that have gotten over on it, right? Tom Aspinall. They're out there swinging, throwing leather, landing big shots, and Tom Aspinall put him down in the dirt. Tom Aspinall, the best in the world. All right, this guy, Sergey Pavlovich, if you're a world championship level fighter, you can beat this guy. Did anybody watch Waldo's last fight and think to themselves, like, this guy's a world championship level fighter? I mean, heavyweight's bad enough that, yeah, anything's possible, like the Kevin Garnett, meme. But it's like, you just look at Waldo, and I think that he's all right. But he went to, a competitive decision with fucking Andrei Arlovsky. This guy's losing rounds to guys that are not very good fighters. And I think that you look at what Waldo brings to the table. He's got a decent, right hand that he can throw like a fastball sometimes. He's got a jab he'll pop out there. He's got half decent footwork for a heavyweight. Anything else? Like, I basically was singing his praises as a plus 200 or whatever he was against Rebellis de Spain, because Rebellis de Spain didn't have a ground game whatsoever to speak of. I was like, if Waldo gets on top of this guy, it should be easy money. You look at this guy, Sergey Pavlovich, he just got a win over Jairzinho Rosenstrike. In my opinion, Jairzinho is a dangerous striker. Jairzinho is a guy that keeps that power throughout the whole fight. So I think that was a more difficult fight for a guy like Pavlovich, honestly. And I think that's why he went to the wrestling more in that fight. He was like, why would I mix it up with this guy who's a huge knockout artist when I could take him down? I think that Sergey Pavlovich can take down Waldo Cortes-Acosta, honestly. Like, I think he's the bigger guy. He hits very hard, in my opinion. I think he hits much harder than Waldo. And so I think if they exchange on the feet, I favor Sergey Pavlovich to knock him out. And if they don't exchange on the feet, I favor Sergey Pavlovich to out-wrestle this guy. So, like, overall, I just think Sergey's the better fighter, and I think he should win this fight. It's minus 250 at heavyweight. Like, could something go wrong? Yeah, they're the same age. They're similar size. I guess the reach is obviously huge for Pavlovich, but I think this Pavlovich guy is built like a freaking steroid refrigerator, and I think that he hits quite hard, and I think that, he's just a more dangerous fighter for me than Waldo, and so for all those reasons, I'll pick him to win. I wanted to shout out Mad Lab MMA and Dan Tom. They do a show, the Dogger Pass podcast, right? It used to be hosted by Paul Shaughnessy, by Cody Safdie. Those guys still do a great show, Bookie Beatdown. I try and listen to some other shows in the industry when I get a chance. And I did like the one thing that Mad Lab MMA said as a potential, reason for how Sergey could lose this fight. I think the way that Waldo wins this fight would be a decision. I think Waldo, unless he lands like a mean punch, Waldo could just skirt around the outside, try and frustrate Pavlovich, try and take a page out of Volkov's book and make it a anti-fight and not fight this guy, run away, move backwards, and hope to eke out a close decision. So for me, that's the one thing that I do, credit as like, how could he win this fight? That's how I think Waldo would have to win it. I think he would have to fight to a close decision. But I honestly think that Sergey has a better game built for like winning MMA fights at this level. The ability to go out there and bank takedowns, like I think that's a good thing. So for me, I think Pavlovich can get the takedown here. And if he can't, I think he can knock him out on the feet. So I think Pavlovich wins. And I think he's fought the better quality of competition. So for me, that's a big factor. All right, guys. Oh, what do you say about this fight? Are we sure that this fight should be, wow. Green King says, no doubt, took a shot at Pavlovich to get a takedown at plus 350. Dude, that's an insane line, and I'm going to bet that too. So I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I'm definitely going to mention that on Patreon as well. I think that's an insane price. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Like, listen, could they go out there and swing it out and he never gets a chance? Sure. But if he attempts one, I think he gets it, like, more often than not. So if that's the case, like, yeah, pretty crazy for me. All right, here we go, though, guys. Let's break down this co-main event, right? We got a 153-pound fight between Brian Ortega and Aljamain Sterling. What happened? I was watching the Twitter live updates in real time, right? Brian Ortega, he's out of the fight. He passed out. He can't make it, right? He passed out trying to make weight. And all of a sudden, a couple hours later, Charles Johnson's like, yo, like, they're here. They're weighing in. Brian Ortega's here. And you watch the weigh-in, you watch the face-off. Brian Ortega looked like dog shit, Hey, my guy Dan Tom is here, brother. I love when somebody catches you giving them a compliment. But, brother, you and Mad Lab put together a great show. So I truly appreciate you being here, rocking with me, and supporting. And I'm always happy to show love to my brothers. And, Mad Lab and I don't really know each other too well. Obviously, me and you go way back. I've told you a million times. You're one of my favorite analysts in the space. Truly, somebody I've modeled a lot of my attention to detail after. So I appreciate you always, my brother. And I think Mad Lab's doing a good thing as well over there. Obviously, been on a great streak. So shout out to you guys, man. I always say game recognize game, real recognize real. Good guys rise, right? We're trying to just build up people that are doing it the right way and always accountable, always talking about the results and everything else. And you're even a little bit too critical on yourself, my brother. As I always tell you, positivity, peace, love, and positivity. You're the man, brother. I appreciate you. And shout out to everybody who's rocking with us, guys. My guy Dan Tom and everybody else as well who's here with us in the chat. Appreciate you all. We love talking about these fights, and hopefully it's another good set of opportunities this week, right? But ultimately, we try and be respectful of the fighters on this show, but also we got to call a spade, right? And you look at Brian Ortega. I had some people saying, like, man, I hope Brian's okay. And, like, obviously that's my sentiment as well. Like, what am I going to wish the guy poorly? Like, no, we want nothing but good things for Brian. But everybody's willing to throw Brian Battle down the river, right? Like, oh, this guy's fat, this guy's missing weight and all this stuff. A lot of people that have never cut weight, by the way, willing to just say all this stuff about cutting weight. People are talking about how could you miss weight going up a weight class? We've seen it before with guys like Johnny Hendricks, who've had years and years of experience cutting weight. Your body, guys, gets used to certain things. So if you're used to cutting down to 170 and then you start giving yourself more calories, it starts retaining them. Then you're trying to cut that back out. Your body gets confused. It does not want to keep going up and down, right? Brian Ortega said after his last fight, where, by the way, he looked like complete shit. He said, guys, I can't fight at 145 anymore. I need you to move me up to 155. I don't want to do this anymore. And they made him go fight at 145 anyway, and this is the result. So now what do you see? You see Brian Ortega coming in, fainting, trying to make the weight, looking like absolute shit, looking unhealthy, looking unwell. The X factor of this fight is that Brian Ortega could come back looking fine on fight night, which we've seen guys miss weight before. We've seen guys cheat on the scale. We've seen guys get sick, get injured, whatever it is, and still come in and perform and win the fight. So am I saying, like, Brian's going to win? No, I don't think Brian's going to win. But the price has now adjusted very heavily from where it was, minus 2XX Aljo, to minus 4XX Aljo, because Brian looked like shit at the scales. And I'll just say that's a hit and miss type of prognostication. But here's the things that I don't like for Brian. Brian's won 2 fights in the last 5 years. When you compare these two guys on paper, the major difference between these guys is that Aljamain Sterling shows up to work, he puts his ass in the jackpot, and he wins fucking UFC fights. That's the difference. Like, simple as, right? Aljamain Sterling signed to the UFC in what year, guys? Pop quiz, 2014. You know who else signed to the UFC in 2014? Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega has 8 wins in the promotion. Aljamain Sterling has 16 wins in the promotion. One guy shows up to work, one guy doesn't. How many losses do they have, you might ask? 4 for T-City Brian Ortega, 5 for Aljamain Sterling. So Aljamain Sterling puts his ass in the jackpot basically twice as often, except he wins his fights. He goes out there and wins his fights, and people don't want to give him credit and respect. So here's the danger for Aljo. This business is fucking cruel, guys. Sometimes you do everything right. You act like a fucking professional. You show up on weight. You do it in any part of the world. You say, oh, now I have to do 5 rounds because my manager is trying to shiv me, even though he's the, manager, coach, corner, whatever the fuck you want to say for Brian Ortega on the other side. Yeah, all of this smells, guys. It smells fishy as fuck. The Tiki Gosen connection smell fishy as fuck. A lot of people don't want to call a spade in this industry. I'll fucking call a spade. I remember when Sean Strickland said this guy was a creepy fucking weirdo. I gave him credit for it. You look back, there's a lot of weird things that have gone on with this guy. His name's been connected to a lot of weird things. I'm not trying to get sued. I'm not trying to get in trouble. Everybody else can adjudicate their things, right? I'm not going to talk specifics more than that. But what I will just say is there are conflicts of interest fucking here, there, and the other, right? There's missing weight. There's fucking, a bunch of scandalous behavior, things that would not go on in Vegas, things that would not go on in normal commissions. You think New Jersey or fucking California is letting somebody pass out, go to the fucking hospital, come back and do the fight? No, but you go to a sketchy commission, you go to a commission where the rules are kind of take them, leave them, the UFC self-regulates, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, shit happens, right? So could Brian Ortega come in and look like an absolute shell of himself and look like a TJ Dillashaw, like he never should have been there? And what does this fight even mean? And give Aljo no credit? Yeah, that's absolutely possible. But it's also possible that Brian has gamed the system at least a little bit, and he's coming in here now as a 160 some odd pound man against a Aljo who used to fight at 135, who's not quite as big in terms of his height, right? So I do think you see some big man tools from Ortega that can be good. He's got good knees. He's got good uppercuts at his best. Those are the things that are dangerous, right? We saw him become the first man, I believe it was, to knock out Frankie Edgar, and he didn't knock him out. He almost decapitated the man. It was an unbelievable uppercut knockout. So Brian Ortega is a guy I've respected as a fighter. The truth is he's a very dangerous guy at his best, guys. If you look back, very few people have put Alexander Volkanovski in danger multiple times in a fight. He did that. Volk was able to deal with it and come back and rally to 10-8 him in the same rounds. Brian Ortega has taken 2 life-changing whoopings in front of our eyes in the UFC. Aljo's been knocked out before. Aljo's been put in bad situations before. So it's not to say that either one of these guys is a surefire lock. You know, Aljamain Sterling's 36 years of age, guys. Like, I get why people wanted to steam it up from -200 to -400. Like, yeah, Aljo should win the fight. But when you've been knocked out cold before in the UFC, like, we can just talk about that honestly. When you've lost decisions before, you know, when you've gotten tired in 4th and 5th rounds before, and now your manager and the coach of the other guy is basically saying, like, let's do 5. Like, okay, Brian is just a guy that has shown he can be dangerous even late in fights, even in fights where he gets tired. And the Korean Zombie performance, the Yair Rodriguez performance, like, he rolled his ankle in that fight, you know, before the Yair fight. Like, I was watching it with a 3-unit bet on Brian Ortega. I wanted to puke in my hands. I was like, guys, he just rolled his ankle. He's probably going to lose the fight. And he found a way to win. He got absolutely shellacked in the first round against Diego Lopes, and he almost got knocked out there. He got absolutely shellacked in the fight where, you know, he goes out there, and we'll go back to the record, right? Diego Lopes gets absolutely shellacked in the first round. Yair Rodriguez was getting shellacked for the entire first round, came back to find the sub late. I appreciated him for it. It was a fucking dope choke, and I appreciate that. But you look back at the other Yair fight. Nobody wanted to give Yair credit at the time. I had bet Yair. He goes for a shoulder lock, and then Brian Ortega's shoulder gives out. This guy's getting injured in fights. He's getting injured before fights. He's getting life-altering beatings from Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. All of it, to me, does point to Aljamain Sterling has a chance to go out there and finish this guy like he did TJ Dillashaw, like he did to some other guys that maybe weren't about that fight life anymore, maybe were a little bit too injury-prone, maybe weren't taking the training as seriously. Rumor has it that Brian Ortega, his training for the last X amount of years hasn't been as serious as some people would imagine for a high-level UFC fighter. And I think it's showing in terms of the regression in his game. At his best, guys, that Chan Sung Jung performance is a fucking thing of beauty. If you've never seen it, go back and watch it. The best he ever looked in the UFC by far. Almost knocked him out multiple times, got to his takedowns, looked very, very good in that fight, looked clean. His counters were on point. His timing was there. If he had a little bit more finishing instincts, he puts him away. But otherwise, guys, he fought a very, very beautiful fight. So at his best, yeah, he's a very good fighter. I just don't think we're seeing Brian at his best. I think we're seeing Brian phone it in. And I think we're seeing Brian at a shittier, lesser version of himself. And the one thing you can never say about Aljo is that he doesn't show up working hard, doing his job each and every time, guys. He's got 5 losses in the UFC. That's it in his career. 5 losses. They're all in the UFC, and they're all to Movsar Evloev, the #1 contender in the division, except for Lerone Murphy. And that's because Lerone Murphy's more marketable, right? I think Movsar Evloev has just as good an argument in terms of wins, quality of wins, right? Then you look at, okay, Sean O'Malley, UFC champion. He lost to him. He beat UFC champions Henry Cejudo, right? He beat UFC champion TJ Dillashaw. He beat UFC champion Petr Yan. He beat title challenger Cordy Sandhagen and put him to sleep in 90 seconds, guys. You understand how difficult that is to do? Beat contenders like Munoz, Rivera, Stamen. So now he's got to go prove he can still do this at 145, right? I do say Aljo's provenness at 145 is a little bit in question, right? He has a competitive fight with Movsar. That's a good thing. But Movsar's had competitive fights with guys you wouldn't always expect, right? Then you look at, okay, who did he beat? He beat Calvin Kattar. Guys, Calvin Kattar hasn't won a fight in some time, right? What was it, Giga Chikadze in 2022? When's the last time Calvin Kattar won a fucking fight? You know, it's been a long time. So he audited like Aljo audited him, right? It was a complete one-sided whooping. I expected more resistance. So, like, Aljo's a hardworking guy, does things right, respectable, professional, championship-level fighter. I think he wins here. But the price for me is now prohibitive. If anything, I'd be looking at, hey, if Brian is just going to phone it in, then Aljo can finish him. And here's the other thing, guys. If Brian wins this fight, I think his best chance to win by far is to finish Aljo. The way that Aljo, I think, loses this fight is putting his head in the wrong position, getting caught by one of Brian's best moves. I think Aljo's too good a grappler, but that's the way that Brian has won fights against good grapplers in the past, right? Get him in one bad position, one bad situation that they can't recover from and finish it with that guillotine choke, with the triangle choke. He's sensational at both those techniques. And he's got brilliant uppercuts. He's got dangerous strikes when he lets him go. So those are the ways I see him winning this fight. I see the rounds, the minutes, the exchanges, the pace, all of those things going towards Aljo. So for me, Aljo's the pick here, guys. I'm a huge Aljo fan. Biases disclosed. Aljamain Sterling bought popcorn from my wrestling team that I coach for. So Aljamain Sterling, always close to my heart, a good person, a guy that I met in person as well. Haven't met many UFC fighters. Gave me the time of day. Cool guy. Had nothing but positive things to say about Aljo. So you'll never hear me slandering Aljo on this show. A lot of people do slander Aljo, and I think he's a very good fighter. But I also try and be honest with my audience and call a spade. And I know that Aljamain Sterling is a very good fighter, but minus 500 against a guy that, was this close to winning the UFC belt at 145, that's a little bit of an overstep, right? It's based on speculation, and it could prove to be right that Brian Ortega's done, that he's retired, that he's going to quit, maybe. But I feel like I'd rather get involved in some props instead of saying just dump the dump truck on minus 510, and then Aljo makes one mistake, zigs when he should have zagged, gets caught because it's a fight at the end of the day. And then people are saying Aljo's a fraud. Aljo was never good anyway. And I know what the industry is like. So that's what people will say if he loses this fight. And now he's the guy that got forced to fight a guy that never made the weight. Aljo made 145. Then he rehydrated to 153 because Brian missed the weight, right? So Aljo did everything right, and he could be the one that ends up getting shafted. But I think he wins this fight, and I'm probably going to look at some Aljo, maybe late finish props, but also just maybe the idea of Aljo TKO. I bet it against TJ Dillashaw close to close because I saw a huge price outlier, and Aljo went out there and ground and pounded him out. And I just think Brian's a difficult guy to submit, right? But he's been getting his head ping-ponged around in his last few fights. And if he's tired, if he's fat, if he's not having the right rehydration to his brain, if any of these things go wrong, I feel like, that's where it opens up. Aljo getting on top of this guy, rolling the wrist, punching him until the ref's forced to intervene. Also, Ortega's strength difference when applying chokes could be a factor. That's very interesting. Do you like over 0.5 takedowns for Ortega, minus 110? I honestly think Aljo's the better wrestler here. I think it would be better for Brian to get Aljo to shoot a shitty shot and then try and choke him on the entry than it would be for him to try and take down Aljo. But I could be wrong about that. That's just the way I feel. If he's to take down Aljo, I think the way he would do it is with a caught kick. That could get you screwed on a takedown prop, but Brian does have good timing catching kicks, and I believe that's how he took down Zombie multiple times. So just something to keep in the back of our mind there. Just don't see how Brian lasts 5 rounds unless Aljo piles up control time. You do have to recognize the one thing I will say is Aljo is a smart guy, and he does not care what people say. He cares about results and winning. That's why he wins all these fights. And if you look at the Petr Yan rematch, he basically fought with a particular strategy to bank the first 3 rounds and then make sure he didn't death gas in rounds 4 and 5. So I think that Aljo, he knows his limitations in terms of the cardio. It's very hard to be a high-pace guy who works at a high pace rate in the wrestling and the grappling and push it for 25 minutes. It's just hard to do all that. So for me, Aljo needs to pick his spots here over 25 unless Ortega is just offering him no resistance, right? And also, GBO says, I was looking at fight doesn't go the distance plus 130. Yeah, and here's the other thing. It was plus 2XX until this weight incident. Right, so everybody was sure this fight was going the distance until all this weight shenanigans shit, and then the line crashed. So I mentioned yesterday on Patreon that if it was plus 155 and over, that made some sense to me to still grab that. I thought it would keep getting bet down. But, as it closes in, it's I think the value's basically been extracted. All right, guys, we can move along here to the main event of the evening. I have another interesting potential takedown prop here. And here's what I got to say, right? I think Johnny Walker's probably getting sparked out badly in this fight. But that being said, he's fought a high level of competition. He's got a lot of UFC experience, and he does have 3 takedowns in the promotion, guys. If I was fighting Zhang Mingyang, if I was coaching somebody fighting him, I'd be like, why on earth would we go exchange with this guy ever? We are taking him down from the second we can. If you can't get him down, okay, now we're forced to exchange on the feet. Let's figure it out. But I would be out there relentlessly wrestling this guy because he's a huge hitter on the feet and he's a very dangerous man. And if you don't get him tired, if you don't put him in a bad situation in the wrestling and grappling, I think he's going to have a chance to beat basically anybody in the division. Like, could there be guys that have like the technical acumen to go out there and outpoint a Zhang Mingyang? Sure. I think he's on, drugs. Like, I think they are pumping this guy with fucking steroids. And again, this is my speculation, but like, he just looks to me like a guy who's gotten a lot more athletic from the regional scene on up. And like, he's basically been built into a really good athlete. He's 27, guys. He's a young man and he's got real power. He's got a willingness to walk through the fire and come knock people out. So if I was to go with the Walker side, we talked about it with Jared Cannonier, right, against Michael Venom Page. Maybe if you like the Jared side, you take the takedown prop instead of the money line, right? Jared ends up losing the decision there, but he got multiple takedowns in that fight. I forget the fight from a week prior to that as well, where there was another fight. Oh, actually, now I remember, right? Eric Anders against Christian Leroy Duncan. If you guys remember, I came on the show and I said, if you like the Eric Anders side, I would bet Eric Anders to get 1 takedown. It was plus money for Anders to get a takedown. And I was like, if he doesn't get a takedown, I don't see how he's going to perform well in this fight. And I think he's going to go out there and shoot takedowns early and often. He went out there, shot a takedown, got a takedown. The guy got back up and sparked him in the first round. So you can go out there and find these opportunities where a guy's going to go out there and try and push that wrestling and give you a chance, give you an opportunity. And if they don't get it, so be it, right? As long as you're getting a plus money number, they're going to give you a shot. And Johnny Walker, I think my guy, Dan Tom, talked about it a little bit. Like, his coaches aren't fools, right? Like, they know that the guy can get clipped on the chin. He's been knocked out in like meme-like fashion many, many times in his career. I believe 6 knockout losses off the top of my head. So if that's the case, like, yeah, Johnny Walker can absolutely get sparked out bad in this fight. And what would you tell him if you're a coach? You would tell this guy, go out there and shoot takedowns, man. Get this guy to the ground. You've gotten takedowns in the UFC before. By the way, Johnny Walker rolled around on the ground with Nikita Krylov, didn't get submitted, right? Didn't get cleaned up there. So it was the ugliest grappling you'll ever see. It was sloppy and terrible from both men, but he was able to hang out there. He's got some semblance of a ground game. So do I think he's going to go out there and look like Walter and fucking fall back to a heel hook or something? Like, no, I don't see that happening. But do I see Johnny going out there and like trying his best to take this guy down before he gets brutally knocked out? I do. So for me, Johnny Walker to get 1 takedown at plus 230 is for me a bet I'd prefer almost to his money line, because I don't think he's going to win this fight very often if he doesn't get a takedown. Like, could he knock this guy out with 1 punch? Sure. It's Johnny Walker, right? Like, he's a dynamic athlete, 6'6", got a huge reach. Like, could he just knock this guy out with 1 punch? Yeah. But I don't think he's going to fight with that game plan, because I think he knows that game plan. This kid can take one better than Johnny can, and I think he can also give one better than Johnny can in terms of the striking. So if that's the case, I think the way Johnny wins this fight is clinching this guy, grappling this guy, wrestling this guy, using mixed martial arts. I just don't think that if you go out there and kickbox with Zhang Mingyang, anything good's going to happen. So also shout out to Nate. He says, I don't like Zhang's willingness to engage when rocked. That could be a problem for him against Johnny if he's able to rock him on the feet. That's fair play. So my guy Green King says, shoot, Walker sub is plus 1,100. Took a shot. Hey, man, if you think that the sub is live at plus 1,100, I think that the takedown at plus 230 is like, it's got to be a look for you as well, personally, right? And again, it's however you want to approach it. That's fair. But just in terms of like, man, if I think that somebody's going to go out there and get that takedown, or excuse me, that sub, then I'm definitely thinking like, yo, how are we getting it to the ground, right? That's certainly something to look at. So for me, if I'm on the Walker side, I'm looking towards maybe the takedown props, maybe the money line, maybe some Walker, finish props. I think that's all fair play. But if you ask me like, what's the percentage odds? Like, I would probably put this at like minus 230 for Zhang Mingyang. I think minus 370 is a little disrespectful to Johnny Walker, but just like 70% of the time, 7 out of 10 times, I think Zhang Mingyang can probably knock this guy out in the first 3 rounds. You know, that's kind of the way I see it. Like, I don't think Zhang's got some like great cardio, whatever, but I don't think he's got horrible cardio where he can't go out there and fight. So, oh goodness, excuse me. I knew I had a sneeze brewing there. Here's what I can do, guys. Before we get out of here super quick, I'm just going to go through and do a super quick recap of the card. So if anybody joined us late, if anybody missed anything, I'm going to circle back with the chat as well. But really quick, guys, we'll start with the very first fight and scroll on up. Diyar, I think, is going to be my pick in the fight with Uran Satibaldiev, but I think Diyar early, he's the better fighter. I think later on in the fight, Uran could probably pick up the pace a little bit on him, could potentially get his own grappling going. Diyar kind of folded the tent last time out in the grappling in a pretty shameless way. So for me, that's something where both these guys have some question marks. Both these guys have a little bit of, elements to their game I don't really trust. I think Uran's hittable. I think he makes some bad decisions at times. I think he can be put in bad positions, but I also think he's a tough guy, a little less likely to quit than Diyar, who did quit in his last fight. And, by the way, just a random tidbit, Uran Satibaldiev, the guy he submitted on the regionals, I believe was also submitted by Brenton Iberio, who submitted Diyar in his last fight. So we could see the brotherhood of the traveling Kimuras here in this fight. But next up, guys, we see Long Xiao taking on Su Young Yu, and I got Long Xiao here. I think he's going to win the fight via knockout or decision. I think Su Young Yu has some ability to win the fight by sub, some ability to win the fight via close decision based on control time, but I think the damage is all coming from Long Xiao here. I think he's going to beat this guy's ass a little bit on the feet, and I think he's going to do damage and make him tired. So, give me that guy, right? Give me Long Xiao. I think that Yiza is in for a rude awakening against Weston Wilson. I could look completely foolish here, right? I always say, got to be willing to look like a fool on these big underdogs at plus 820. Give me the dog, Weston Wilson, man. I think the line's too big. I think that Weston Wilson, a black belt under Giba Santana, the arm collector, has a chance to go out here, submit this guy, and show that Yiza is not UFC level. Yiza has not won a UFC fight yet. He needs to prove to me that he's a UFC level guy before I'm trusting him at minus 1,600 against anybody. And in this fight, I have a guy, Weston Wilson, with a UFC win under his belt. Yeah, for me, that's just a crazy line. Next up, Michel Pereira taking on Kyle Dawkins. Listen, Kyle Dawkins live totally makes sense to me. Michel Pereira pre, if you want to get involved with those finish props, I think that's the way you look at this. I think that this is the kind of fight where Michel Pereira, he's a dangerous knockout artist. He's got power in his hands. He's also got a submission threat. But if he doesn't come out there trying to fight, he's not going to win. So he's got to go out there and show that he's a little bit more committed to his fighting than he was in his last fight. Last time out, I didn't trust what I was seeing. And, he just didn't seem like a guy who really wanted to fight and wanted to win. And in this fight, he should have a opponent in front of him that motivates him like, hey, if I go out there and give my best, I can win this one. But Kyle Dawkins on the other side, guys, he's pushed very hard for this opportunity to get back to the UFC. He does not want to squander it. So I think he's going to go out there and give whatever he's got. Kyle Dawkins is going to give his best, but it just might not be enough, right? Athleticism matters at this level, and Michel Pereira has more of it. So ultimately, I'm going to pick him slightly to get the win if it ends early. I just think Dawkins is the kind of guy that will push hard to take over late if he's still alive. Next up, guys, we got Rongzhu taking on Austin Hubbard. I think Rongzhu is going to take this guy's lunch money. That's the way I see it. Respect Austin Hubbard, 4-7 in the UFC, but I think that this guy, is starting to take more damage. I don't really trust that, he can go out there and deal with the power that Rongzhu is bringing. He's got 21 finishes and 26 professional wins. And I think that Rongzhu is the kind of guy that he can be equal opportunity, right? If Austin Hubbard wants to give up that neck, no problem. We'll take that. If he wants to go out there and do damage with his hands, get working in those phases, I think Rongzhu can do that as well. I think he's the more powerful guy. I think he's the better athlete. I think he's the more dangerous fighter. For all those reasons, give me Rongzhu to get it done on home soil. I think that Loner Kavanagh is going to be in for the toughest fight of his life, and he's a massive favorite in terms of the public perception here. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation. I'm leaning towards pass just because the market looked a little fishy to me earlier, but I will take a closer look at the market, see how it's shaken out. Maybe more parlay dollars have come in later on in the week, but it just seems to me like a lot of money was on Charles Johnson and the line was not reacting accordingly. And, I'm just a little bit worried about the market conditions. But ultimately, guys, I think Charles is a good fighter. I think he presents a good challenge. And I haven't seen Loner Kavanagh blow out anybody yet at the UFC level. So for me, he's got to go prove it in this fight. Next up, guys, we've got Mahashate and Gage Young. I don't have much to say here, except I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be competitive. If anybody looks like a big favorite, maybe I'd say Gage Young, just because he does hit hard. He does have an ability to mix in some takedowns, but Mahashate is big. If Gage Young isn't getting takedowns, if he's just stuck out on the feet with him, I think they're going to be trading heavies. I think either guy could get clipped or hurt. I think Gage slightly more durable. I think both guys hit very hard, though. I think both guys are willing to exchange. Both guys 25. So, again, a lot of similarities for me between these two. A little bit of size and home field advantage for Mahashate. But on the other side, Gage Young got his UFC jitters out last time. Now he's going to show a better performance for me. And I did think that he was a live dog against Salkeld. He went out there and proved that. I thought Salkeld would win, but I thought Gage would make it close, and people were selling him short on Contender. And now I think that, he's favored in this fight. I can't get behind that in terms of go out there and bet it. But I do think he deserves to be closely lined because he's a tough kid. He's going to go out there and make a good account of himself more often than not. And Evan Elder, tougher fight. Quill and Salkeld, tougher fight in terms of what they've proven so far. And Mahashate, better win on paper over Steve Garcia than anything Gage has done, but he hasn't done it for a long time. That was in 2022. His recent fights have not looked great. So let's see if Mahashate can get back on track. Next up, guys, we got a UFC debutant against a guy who's been really, really bad in the UFC in Kiefer Crosbie. And I'm going to take the debutant here, but biases acknowledged. Kiefer Crosbie knockout 1 would be fucking awesome for the Irish. So I'll be rooting for Kiefer Crosbie to get it done. But I just think that this other guy is a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more committed to his offense. He takes huge risks, though. So I think somebody's getting put to sleep more often than not in that fight. And I'm going to go ahead and say I think Nueraji wins it. I think he stops him in the first 2 rounds. But Kiefer Crosbie, round 1, KO 1, if you want to get involved on his side, I think that makes sense. Maybe even KO 1-2 type of thing. I do think his opponent takes a lot of risks, but I don't trust Kiefer's cardio basically at all from what we've seen, and I don't trust his grappling either. Sumudaerji, guys, I think gets the win here against Borhas. I think he can do it via any method, honestly. I think he could do it via sub. I think he could do it via knockout. I think he could do it via decision. I think Borhas could get a knockout here. I think he could win a close decision, but I just don't really rate his grappling. I don't think that he's a guy that, has a ton of experience on the level of a guy like Sumudaerji. And I think that Kevin Borhas is a guy that, still needs to show me something. The Lazy Boy Rodriguez fight, I didn't really get a great feel for his true skill there, and he's the smaller man in this matchup. Sumudaerji, a lot more experience. So for me, this is the kind of fight where give me Sumudaerji to get the win, but again, minus 170 price tag. You could leave that one on the cutting room floor, in my opinion. I think Sergey Pavlovich is going to run Waldo for his lunch money. My Dominican brothers will not be happy to hear that. So I think the big Platano, Salsa Boy, you see a lot of interesting guys coming out here going to look at and make a big impression. But I think Sergey Pavlovich, he's been fighting a way different level of competition in the UFC. Waldo's going to competitive decisions with Arlovsky. He's going to competitive decisions, as well with, what's his name, Sergey Spivak. It just doesn't strike me as wow, this guy's poised to go take over the heavyweight division. Pavlovich, huge knockout power, has the ability to go out there and earn a decision as well. Showed on the regional scene prior to the UFC, he knows how to wrestle. So maybe Salsa Boy can make him work with the, footwork. Maybe he can go out there, poke away to a decision. I just don't think he's as dangerous as Pavlovich. So for me, the way that Waldo wins this fight would be outpointing him to a decision. I think Pavlovich is live via KO or decision, and I'm going to pick him to get the win. All right, guys. Then we got Ortega and Sterling. I gave my diatribe here. I don't think Brian Ortega, is a bad fighter. I just don't think he's about it anymore. I don't think he wants this life anymore. I think that Aljamain Sterling does. I think he's more committed to the process. But I also believe, at the end of the day, a fight's a fight. And Brian Ortega knows how to fight. He's a dangerous man in his own right. I think Aljo's going to get the win here. I think Aljo could get the finish here. But I also know that Brian Ortega is a dangerous finisher. He's a big man. And, Aljo has been hurt before. He's been finished before. And I think that you have to just be respectful of people's skill in this game. I don't know exactly how Brian Ortega is going to feel on the night. If he feels like shit, if he doesn't want to be there, he's probably going to quit. But if he was able to rehydrate, if they get him feeling okay for this fight, then he's a serious fighter, who's had, UFC title level fights, gone out there and gotten big wins, beat Yair Rodriguez, another top contender in the division quite recently as well. So I think you just have to make sure you don't get caught speeding here, chasing a line that was minus 2XX yesterday to now minus 510 the night of the fight, and you're putting it in every parlay and hoping that Aljo doesn't slip on a banana peel, just because at the end of the day, price is everything, guys. And how much edge are you getting on a fight when you're laying minus 500 price tags? You got to know, like, this guy beats him in every phase, every way. He's more durable. He's the better athlete. Like, you need to check every box at those prices. And I just don't think Aljo checks every single box. I think if this wasn't a 5-round fight, if his opponent had made weight, if blah, 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 then maybe he checks more boxes even. But there's enough unknowns here that I would say minus 400, that's probably a hard cap on where I would feel that you have any chance of getting like value on Sterling here personally. And that could be wrong, but that's just the way I approach these fights conceptually. And like, to say that Brian Ortega, a guy with 8 UFC wins, a guy with proven finishing abilities, a guy that has the ability to hurt people with hands, the ability to hurt people with elbows, the ability to put people away with chokes, you just don't want to say that guy's got no chance to win a fight. Then you look at Johnny Walker, same thing in the main event, right? Johnny Walker has good offense. He's got 21 wins as a professional. He's knocked out good fighters like Khalil Roundtree. So you just have to say, at the end of the day, Johnny Walker is a dangerous man. But on the other side, he's not a very durable man. And I think that Mingyang Zhang, you know, he's gotten knocked out before and these kind of things. But I think right now, the steroid supplements, whatever you want to call them, pick a lane, like whichever supplementation he's on, good, bad, or indifferent. I think that this guy is a lot more durable now than he was at 19, right? And I think that you look at Mingyang Zhang, he's a really dangerous guy with his hands. He's a dangerous guy with his elbows. He knows what he wants to do. He crashes the pocket hard. He makes people fight him. But he could also get taken down, in my opinion. You remember, if you've seen my tweets before, Mingyang Zhang plus 450 underdog when he was on road to UFC, and he absolutely starched Tuco Tokos in the first round. But you got to keep in the back of your mind, like, you know, why was he such a big underdog there? It's because they were worried he was going to get out-grappled. And Johnny Walker has basically said, like, I've been training to wrestle in this camp. Like, he's going to come out here and try and wrestle this guy. So I think Johnny Walker, one takedown, if you like that side, plus 230, you know, hope for the best there. Maybe he can go out there and cash it for you and then get knocked out later that same round. All good. But for me, it's Zhang via knockout in the first few rounds. I think they're trying to make a star out of this guy. I did put him on my, like, what would you call it? Like dark horses in the division at light heavyweight, you know, just because you have to look for these guys that the UFC is going to try and push, going to try and make an international star out of these guys. And you're trying to do it early in their career before they've been scouted a lot, before everybody knows about them. And for me, Mingyang Zhang, we'll get it right on the last one. He was able to, you know, basically show, hey, I'm a dangerous guy that can go out there, put on fun fights, 1-round bangers, knock people out, and he's a big man. A lot of these Chinese athletes that they have on the roster that have had success, you look at a Song Yadong, that's a bantamweight in the men's division. You look at Zhang Wei Li, you look at Yan Xiaonan, they're strawweights in the women's side of the game. You know, now you're looking at a big knockout artist from China that could turn into a global superstar if they can get him 1 or 2 more big wins under his belt that shows he's at the level. And Johnny Walker has just the right amount of highlight reel knockout susceptibility and credibility as a contender that this is a perfect fight for Zhang Mingyang. I think Zhang Mingyang's going to knock him out, but hopefully Johnny Walker can cash that 1+ takedown prop before that happens. So guys, there you have it. That's all my thoughts for UFC Shanghai. I wanted to say shout out to my guy YBB in the chat, a legend, a friend of the show. Liam, don't go to sleep. Watch the card till the sunrise. You think I'm going to sleep? Come on now. It's like you don't know me at all. I'll be up all night. I'll be watching these fights. I appreciate everybody who is a sicko like me, who's going to be up all night. I understand if you've got to get your sleep as well. That's totally understandable. But for me, I am just feeling like this is the kind of card where we're going to watch, we're going to try and have fun, we're going to enjoy it. And I think that this should be fun action, fun scraps, a lot of violence. And, you know, I wouldn't get overexposed on a card like this, right? I wouldn't get overinvested, but could you find some long shots, some opportunities on a card where maybe fewer people are paying attention in the market? Maybe people don't care as much. I know some people a little bit checked out this week. I wanted to just say, I will never leave you guys hanging, right? So I couldn't get a guest. I tried my best. I went through the Rolodex. I think I hit up like 8, 9, 10 different people. And Unfortunately, it just didn't work out this week for a guest, but I always do my best to bring you guys a great guest. If I can't bring one, I'm going to come to the table prepared with my thoughts, with my analysis, my opinions. I've written it all up as well for Roto Grinders and these kind of things been posted on Patreon. So all my thoughts are out there on these fights, but I wanted to come to you guys, talk to you guys about them. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, I will be up. So I will try and get back to them all before the fights start. They're going to be going on in about let's say 80 minutes local time. So I'm excited to watch them. If you guys have questions in between now and then, go ahead and fire them off in the comment section. I truly appreciate the support. Sharpest chat in the game each and every week. I want to let you guys know we're going to be back for Contender Series next week. So if you guys are excited about that, make sure you hit the notification bell. It will tell you when we go live. I go live with my guy Gordo Gambles over on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Wanted to say once again, shout out to everybody who's been in here that's a friend of the show, that's a supporter of the show, that has done their own content as well. My guy Dan Tom and a couple of these other big names. My guy Locker Room that I'm seeing as well, doing great interviews each and every week in the space. Make sure you show some love to Locker Room. Nate as well, 6 months as a channel member. Have to shout out Nate. Thank you guys all so much. Thank you to High Watermark, a constant contributor on the show. Don't forget to hit the like button, says MMA Foo, which I truly appreciate, and I hope that you guys will all do that. Those things, liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, hitting that bell for notifications, those are the little things that make a big difference, and I truly do appreciate the support. That's all I got for you guys this week. It has been a fun one. We absolutely crushed the reads, guys, on Contender Series. I'm not going to front. We absolutely crushed the reads on Contender. We had, let's go back to it, as a matter of fact. Before we get out of here, guys, we have to go back to the Dana White Contender Series week 2 analysis, because we were just feeling it last week, right? Jimenez wins the fight via KO and gets a contract. That was our first prediction here, right? We look down, favorite bet, Jimenez via KO, plus 110 on FanDuel. Absolutely banged, put him away, I think, in the very first round. And then if we go through and look, Hokit fight, right? I said Uriel money line or Hokit round 2, round 3. He comes out and finishes the job in round 2. We talked about the cardio. We talked about that from an analytical standpoint. Uriel didn't have great cardio. Hokit did. So if Hokit could extend him, he could win the fight. Then we go back and we look, okay, next fight up. Scott versus Sykumar. How about this? Lewis Lee Scott via KO or unanimous decision. He was on his way to winning the decision, and then what happened? Round 2 and round 3. What's my favorite bet? Round 2 and round 3 for Lewis Lee Scott. We had it in writing, plus 900, I believe it was, for the round 3, plus 1,200 for the KO 3. Both of them were in the betting strategy guide. Absolutely cooked. The only official bet on the card, because I cannot access these props myself in the great state of New York, unfortunately, Cam Rouston on the money line. Shout out to the good folks at Novig making some New York lines available to us. Cam Rouston, the Battle Giraffe. Y'all must have forgot. This guy's coming back. He's got 12 fights under his belt. He's a city kickboxing guy. He's fighting a guy with 5 fights on short notice who's been hurt in his last 2 fights against the only guys that you've heard of with a Wikipedia page. Come on, man. I thought that was craziness. So ultimately, did I think Cam was going to knock him out? No, I did not. You look at that prop list, I thought Cam was going to probably submit him, but ultimately Cam went out there with a mission, hurt this guy on the feet. I thought he was going to go club and sub. He said club and club and club and club until the ref pulled him off, and that was all that she wrote. So Cam Rouston went in and cashed in our bet. Appreciated that. I thought that Delano would beat Manuel Exposito via stoppage. He did everything but, guys. I said that Delano was going to win the fight. I was quite confident in that. I said even Delano is a massive favorite here. I can't really push back on him being a big favorite. That's it. I just can't. So ultimately, guys, super proud of the reads. I do a ton of research on Contender Series to get myself ready for that show each and every week. So I'm going to be right back to it, right? We've got these fights going on tonight. I'm going to watch them all. Then I'm going to get some rest. I'm going to come back with my Dana White Contender Series research ready to go for Monday night. So if you guys appreciate the content, if you enjoy that, like I said, like, subscribe, channel member, Patreon, all that stuff. Those are great ways to support as well. But free 99. Drop a like, drop a comment, show some love, share it on social media if you enjoy. That's all I got for you guys today. God bless. Good luck. Enjoy those fights and come back on Monday because we got Dana White Contender Series all over again. Take care, guys.